Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
This real side experience would begin with my present in what appeared to be a very lush and vibrant environmental setting. In my company also were a large number of individuals, impressions suggesting that although not the most one-dimensional characters in creation, all appearing to be human, none of them were in any shape or form embracing or even considering the recognition of the true reality and the process required to reach that point, which in actuality is the essence of life, that of endless self-recognition made possible via the real awarenesses. That as the real awareness achieves all is recognition, as all real awareness is a part of life, this everything reality, this becomes then greater recognition the is has of its own endlessness. This then becomes what DUANE references as the real purpose for each real awareness, and indeed the reason for simulated creations to be in existence in the first place. This larger body of humans had somehow managed to position themselves creationally in this environmental dimension that, as I said, appeared very resplendent and certainly could be easily referenced as, say, a Garden of Eden in all its natural splendour. Content then were these humans, but impressions suggested that where they had placed themselves, as agreeable as it seemed to be, they still were in creation. And as I mentioned previously, creation serves as the mechanism by which the all-is can be recognized from the comparison that it, all the ideas it comprises of, provides. The ideas, the pieces, in relation to the everything that is the true reality. And although there are undoubtedly areas of creation and dimensions that would have appeal if we are operating within a simulation which would be anything made visual through the body forms that decode ideas into the simulation we experience, we still are within the creational, unreal realms. The everything isness reality is aside from anything as presented via the body form mechanics, as within an everything reality, There can be nothing presented isolated in relation to anything else. There is no apparent differentiation that allows for identifying of individuality of a feature and a form, such as that which is visual, audible, etc. I used to be affiliated with a group referred to as the template, and they had the same notion, a means they had established where they could alter the consciousness through the application of sound frequency and geometry, which would allow a transference to an alternative position far from the reach of the dark force reptilians, according to them. That they may have been able to achieve this was not beyond the realm of a possibility, for consciousness dictates our creational positioning in how we have constructed it. Change the construct, and you alter the effected positioning consequently. The template, however, made no mention or reference to the real purpose, is recognition, and thus their mechanism was one that was solely creationally based. And as this simulator is currently spiraling towards implosion, due to the distortion of the overall consciousness that affects it, and indeed that generally unconsciousness prevails, for the moment at any rate, wherever we position ourselves in the simulator, should we be still locked within it when the simulator implodes, as its downward spiraling degradation cycles eventually reach this conclusion, all that the simulator comprises of, its multi-dimensional layout, will wink out of existence with it, including the more delightful areas within its confines. This was the fallacy of the template, as it was in actuality simply repositioning those in affiliation to alternative creational areas, a case of deck chair rearranging on the Titanic, as they say. This large group of humans had seemingly undertaken a similar process, by which they had afforded for themselves improved creational positioning, but again there was no reference or recognition in regards to the true reality, the real guides, the new you sound connection, etc. I would attempt to convey to them the very real prospect of simulator implosion, regardless of positioning within it, and imperative is it to recognize the years that the necessity of the simulator no longer is a requirement, but my words fell on deaf, or should I say, unconscious ears. I would remain with them for a time, for as I mentioned, they were more open than most. They had, after all, embarked on some process or other which had afforded them better creational positioning than most humans, but my efforts in assisting them further, in regards to affording the real references of the all-ears, would prove somewhat futile. As though to emphasize my point, however, it was as though time sped up, and what seemed like moments in the very pristine, environmentally based dimension was in actuality maybe centuries. I would remain with the group throughout this duration, and as predicted, their delectable dimension became something altogether different. For the moment we now were in would be at a point of extreme simulator deterioration, and even if there were some delightful dimensions still in existence at that stage, these were also in states of decay. The environment began to crack and smoulder as though subjected to extreme earthquakes, and ultimately what it had been would give way to a barren landscape devoid of vegetation, a darkened sky, and the predominant features would be large erupting and lava-producing mountains. Of the group there was no sign, for at a point in the experience The scene had faded to black, as though a transition between movie sections, and now I was alone in the barren, destroyed, and desolate dimension. Impressions suggested the humans had been obliterated in the upheavals, very likely then repositioned elsewhere, in accordance with their consciousness design, though still in the simulator overall they would be. As I said, they had repositioned themselves, but ultimately would be caught in what would be multi-dimensional deterioration, as the simulator was sputtering very closely toward implosion at the moment I currently was in. That although there are options put in place for the new friends, and those on their awareness processes, creational relocations, should their current positional circumstances become no longer conducive for survival, the difference is that of the overall intent being placed with the all-is and its recognition, that these alternative creational positions, should such be necessary to implement, are but pit stops along the way to universal real awareness positioning with the true reality, and absent of the need for the personal self and creation altogether. I would wander a little longer through the barren, cracked, inhospitable landscape beneath the dark, forbidding, and ominous skies, and then the scene would fade. I now would be occupying a moment in overall consciousness-affected simulator affairs, where the simulator's state of deterioration was where it had been as this experience began. From the personal perspective, I had gone back in time, though in reality back to the present, so to speak. I would be approaching a large supermarket on the earth, accompanied by a group of individuals. At one point, they would proceed within the building. I, on the other hand, would linger, as something else was drawing my attention. Something that my group and all other human bystanders and scene participants hadn't registered, as though an area of the car park surrounding the supermarket served as a portal or conduit of a kind, though nothing visual and simulated was presented to suggest this, more a real awareness knowing. I would proceed towards this point, and as though be relocated to another position, finding myself still in the company of humans, though all would be seated as though in a lecture hall of a kind, and taking the stage would be a very charismatic man indeed, still as human as all those seated before him, but he had a very highly developed presence and aura about him, his audience in rapt awe and attention with every word he conveyed. Curious as to this situation, I would take a seat also. It seemed infiltration wasn't required, none present, including the man orchestrating proceedings, were in any way put out of countenance by my abrupt arrival and of assuming a seat. Human this man may have been, the one taking the stage, but not only was his created personality very magnetic, but he seemed to have developed extraordinary body-form skills, in which he could induce states of altered consciousness in others. He would wander around the audience, and with the touch of his hand upon them, so would the recipient descend into a deeper sleep. This was not merely as a demonstration of his abilities to captivate and gain the acceptance of his audience more so, but he was actually inducing sleep with the body forms he touched, their awarenesses then vacating the physical bodies, and he would be taking them to other alternative dimensions on the real side, still operating through his own physical body form in the whole, but consciously and simultaneously on other dimensions also, with those he had touched, and where they had vacated their physical level slumbering body forms. After a certain duration, those who had been the recipients of induced sleep would awaken, and speak in amazement and awe of their real side other dimension exploration as dictated by the man on the stage who had accompanied and escorted them. And now the man would reveal his intentions, that seemingly he had created a program or a process where those who adhered to it and followed his direction would be relocated from the current human Earth physical position to what he referred to as the other worlds, levels 2 and 3 specifically, according to him. This revealed to me that he had a means by which he could reposition others to what very likely would be visually delightful creational positions, and as he mentioned levels 2 and 3, this suggested areas of creation that were of the astral and causal life levels. For indeed, the designated heavens of man, as managed by the dark force reptilians, and overseen by the reptilian self-proclaimed gods, can appear visually very stunning, everything that you might imagine a heaven to be. But in actuality, these would still be controlled positions, and overall would still be simulator-based. It would seem then that this man had determined a means by which he could make alterations to the consciousnesses of others, much as the template through sound frequency and geometry could do, that effected were alternative creational positioning to what transpired were areas of the astral or the causal. In reality, these humans very likely would go to the astral regardless, as the general next position for most unconscious humans, though only on a transition and demise of the physical level body form would they have the awareness view of it. In reality, they and every being is everywhere, every dimension simultaneously. It is only the creational mechanics that afford isolation and differentiation of dimension and life level, and our view is determined by our intent, focus, and attention placement, with most humans resigning their respective views to the physical and astral by virtue of their intent and inclination centered around emotional sensation gratification. At this point, all listening to this experience ought to be devoid of loose change, as the penny should have dropped, as they say. Where this experience began, I had encountered a large group of humans that via some mechanism so had they been repositioned dimensionally, and now it appeared I was being shown what this mechanism was, the creationally developed and capable man who had devised a means of consciousness alteration in his subjects, that this very creational repositioning, as exemplified by the large group earlier, was made possible. The large group from earlier were evidently some of his students, perhaps those present now in the hall, where the man was promoting his process of creational relocation. At this point, everyone present had been at some stage rendered asleep and experienced these dimensions as revealed by the man leading the proceedings, and all were besotted and enthralled with the possibility and prospect of creational repositioning. Impressions revealed, the man harboured nothing by way of concealed intention or deception. He was sincere in his motivations, in that he desired to remove humans from their controlled, Earth-based physical level situation to what he considered delightful alternative dimensional paradise, utopian-like areas. The man had awareness to a degree, but not enough that he realized the controlled nature that the entirety of the simulator presented as. Not only that all ideas are as restricting, cause and effect creationally binding anchors, regardless of their nature, but he was blissfully oblivious that the Dark Force reptilians, in all their expressions, held dominion over every life level of the simulator, including the levels he was to be relocating his subjects to, the astral and causal presumably. And now he would lay his hands upon me, and I would vacate the body form I was occupying, and be taken to these other dimensions, and in the presence of this man. Not only were the dimensions as delightful to behold as the creational position I had initially found myself in, where this experience began, but it was in these very dimensions where a process seemed to be exacted by the very man accompanying me, the one whose overall operation this was. I have encountered beings with the ability to make consciousness alterations in others. The more aware an individual generally, the more likely will they have such a capability. But despite such skills that these beings can exact changes to my consciousness, or the consciousnesses of others, is dependent on agreement, for we all decide our experience, and in relation to others, according to the ideas we install as agreements in our consciousness. This man could do nothing, despite his developed consciousness altering and other skills, unless he had agreement, and he surely had secured it from every human sat in the lecture hall. And although I allowed then to be taken by him to these other dimensions, I rather withheld agreement that he could make alterations to my consciousness, as I failed to see the prudence in positioning myself in accordance to what was a relatively unaware being, and whose only inclinations were creationally and personal self-based, despite his intentions not being in any way malicious or abrasive. This seemed to irritate the man, and while I was within one of these alternative dimensions with him, I would be approached by a heavy-set woman who also had been taken to this dimension, but was harbouring doubts in regards to fully embracing what the man was offering to become one of his subjects. For perhaps then the man's motivations were based on personal self-gratifying in regards to being beheld as a saviour, to have a flock of devotees that adored him as a consequence. The man would mutter words to the effect, of all those of my subjects, this had to be the woman that Kevin chose to associate with, as though the man realized this woman was the only one who was not completely taken with what he was offering, and he would proceed to sever her head from her shoulders. The means by which this was achieved was that he would manipulate the very dimension we were in, that it fragmented in a curious way, and was the cause of her elimination, the removing of her head from her shoulders. I would return now to the hall with the others, all of which were utterly devoted to the man and the prospect of creational relocation as he could deliver, all oblivious of the demise as suffered by the woman, and I would be met with incredulity and disbelief as I attempted to reveal what had transpired in regards to her. The man and his group now were very aggressively inclined towards me, through my resistance to what they all had embraced. and I would take the opportunity to speak of the real universes of the ears, that regardless of every idea they were formulating, embracing, and the dimensions of creation they might position themselves within, all of it wasn't the reality of their real awareness true being selves, and of the isness they were actually a part of. But alas, much like the group where the experience began, who, as I said, were subjects to the man and his operation here, no one present could grasp what I was trying to convey. Locked into the personal selves as they were, they simply didn't have the tools to recognize anything other than the ideas of creation that the personal self-consciousness is designed to create, process, and present as a simulation. As only through the real awareness can the true reality that it is a part of be determined and recognized, a real awareness they were all choosing to disregard. The man, very creationally powerful as I said, now would bring his considerable will to bear, and as though bombard me with the thought forms and influence, designed to as though assuage me into a capitulation, a kind of mind control effort, if you will. I would withstand this, and he would then elect to attempt my elimination. His flock were so enamoured with him that at this stage he could have done anything before their eyes, and they would have adored him no less. He would transform into a far more formidable body type. I may best describe it as a golden and very muscular form, and one bathed in swirling nuances of colour. Evidently he required this form to be at his most invincible, that my eradication be assured. As I mentioned earlier, as the deciders of our experience, that others can in any way harm or eliminate us, these are as ideas I must have installed in my consciousness, that this is then my experience in relation to others who desire my destruction. Absent of the ideas, and the simulation can't follow, and try as a being might to slay us, irrespective of their might or capability. If I lack agreements that this can be so, then the effort will be mitigated in whatever simulated way it might. My general fallback position and mechanism of repelling of all abrasive beings is the assumption of alternative forms more formidable than theirs, though in reality the form is incidental. It's the agreement or lack of it that dictates the outcome. My standard defensive form is that of a very large two-legged wolf, and this situation would be no different. I would engage the man in his glowing golden form and best him in a furious combat. He would eventually relent, realizing he was outgunned, or out-toothed I should say, and would surrender, and we both would resume our human forms. Throughout the skirmish, all of the man's subjects seemed to maintain their desire to follow him into the glorious new dimensions, and determining that he couldn't bring any of his ability, mind control techniques, or shape-changing skills to bear, that I could become a part of his flock, or indeed destroyed by his hand, his only recourse was to demand that I leave. I would decide this the most prudent form of action, but there would be one individual, a young man present, who, despite still deciding to remain as a loyal devotee to the man, at least wasn't vehemently opposed to me, as the man and all his subjects were. And I would attempt once again to convey the real references of the ears, the real purpose, that of ears recognition, and that the dimensions he and the group were destined for were simulated, unreal positions, as he was the only one who would even be remotely receptive to anything I had to say at that point. But like all the others, and the man orchestrating the show, he was unable to grasp and recognise what I was presenting. But perhaps at least these humans are now aware of the real references, the New You song, etc., and despite they disregarding them, they still have been exposed to them. And in the end, this is all we can do, present the New You, and the real purpose of all is recognizing and positioning as every experience we have, physical level and real side, is as opportunity for just this, regardless of our success.
Yeah, it's a good objective view for people, and it's very, very needed to see what's taking place, and the individual's attitude is a lot here. In other words, if he would have listened to Kevin and wanted to learn more, but again, for the longest time, we all get stuck with the personal self and the ideas we've created as we think that we're the special individual and not seeing the bigger picture that all life is the opportunity to be free of this personal self, and that it's all life that's real, and that we are the experiencer. But in the meantime, it's such, and again, all we can do is present it. But again, for us that see this, it's a very, very good objective view. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yes, David Icke had similar idea, according to Kevin or Mary Pierce knows about this, that he had a group of individuals he was going to take to a special place in creation outside of all the aggravation and suffering. So it reminds me of what he had going on too, or has going on.
It looks good, it sounds good, and it's the savior idea, but at the same time, people are controlled by the idea also. They don't see that because that's all they know. It's just like when we were kids and we went to school, our parents told us to go to school, and so we didn't know anything, and so we did. If I would have known now if I would have known then what I know now, no, I wouldn't have gone to school. I would have found other ways and created the adventure myself, but we didn't know at that time, so we listened to our parents, we listened to the teachers, the authorities, etc., until we know better. So it's a process, isn't it? Yeah.